So I'm 42 years old, and as long as I've been alive, we've been trying to blame some sort of food for why everyone's becoming obese. In the 80s, it was all about low-fat diets. In the 90s, it was all about Atkins. In the 2000s, it was all about avoiding different types of chemicals and sugars. And that's also kind of extended into now, where we're looking at more low-carb diets, looking for the solution. And sugar is probably the most commonly blamed thing there is for the obesity epidemic. However, today I want to talk about some things that may surprise you. This may fly in the face of your current beliefs, but please be open-minded, don't be defensive, and be open to all possibilities. And this is coming from someone who used to truly believe that sugar was pretty much the devil and needed to be avoided at all costs. So here's the thing, all this time has passed, there's been so many different kinds of methods that get popular, yet obesity keeps rising. And while it can be easy to blame sugar, if you take a look at this chart, around the year 2000 or so, we flipped, started consuming much less sugar, yet obesity just continues to rise at a fast pace. Now granted, this gets cut off at 2013, I don't know what the date has been since, but regardless, over a decade of sugar coming down, obesity keeps coming up. And while I'm not suggesting we should just run out and eat all the sugar we want, I do want to look at some literature because there's actually some growing research that shows sugar is not really the problem when calories are equated, and we just seem to be eating more and moving less and therefore gaining more weight. And if we take a look at this study, they equated calories and protein, had one group do a high sugar diet and the other group a low sugar diet. The high sugar group ate about 44% of their calories from sugar. So almost half of the calories they got were from sugar. The other group was only about 4%, and they saw no differences in fat loss, and pretty much all health markers were the same as well. So if sugar was the problem when calories were equated, then the high sugar group should have seen much worse results, right? There was another study that equated calories but had one group do a diet that was higher carb and one that was lower carb, trying to produce a large difference in insulin, as insulin is often blamed as well, and this is where sugar comes into play too. But in this study, they had the high carb group eat 300 grams of carbs per day, and the low carb group ate 30 grams of carbs per day, and the higher carb group had 47% higher levels of insulin, yet there was no difference in fat loss. In 2013, there was this meta-analysis that was done where they looked at a lot of different research, and they came to the conclusion when you replace sugars with other macronutrients, there's no change in weight. And adding on top of that, there's all kinds of different studies that have looked at different high versus low GI types of diets, again, calories equated, that showed no difference. And besides just the research, I've shown some examples in the past. I've talked a lot about the abs and ice cream diet guy who spent 100 days eating 2,000 calories worth of ice cream and ended up losing 30 pounds and improving all of his health markers. There's the Twinkie diet guy who ate a large portion of his diet on things like Twinkies and junk food who saw good results. There's lots of examples of people doing this. And you may be thinking, okay, that's all well and good, but sugar is addicting. When you have it, you're gonna want more, you're gonna eat more, and it's gonna get out of control. But honestly, the research doesn't really back that either. In fact, there was a study in 2017 that had almost 1,500 subjects, and what they did was look at the symptoms of food dependency on different types of foods, and they found 29.5% of people were more dependent on high-fat savory foods, 25% of people were more dependent on higher fat, sweeter type items that were probably higher in sugar, but only 5% of people fell into more strictly high sugar foods. And this is one of the most common misunderstandings of sugar. It's not really sugar you're after, it's usually foods that are high in fat as well as high in sugar that makes them so tasty, but those foods often have just as many calories from fat as they do carbs, if not even more. For instance, a frosted chocolate donut from Dunkin' Donuts, it has 31 grams of carbs and 15 grams of fat, but remember, fat has 9 calories per gram, carbs has only 4. So in this case, the donut actually has more calories from fat than it does carbs, at 135 calories from fat and 124 calories from carbs. And this really goes for the case of almost all those types of sweet, high sugary foods you like. Things like cookies and pastries and ice cream. These things all have usually similar amount of calories from carbs as they do fat. So do you really think that sugar is addictive? I mean, if you were thinking about it, it's not like people ever binge on Pixie Sticks. sticks. I mean, whenever you see somebody in the corner just downing pixie sticks like crazy, like they don't do that, right? You binge on things like donuts and pastries and cake and cupcakes. And of course, everyone has different preferences, but that's much more common. So it's really more the combination of sugar and higher fat that you probably like. Now, all that being said, am I suggesting that you should just run out and eat a bunch of sugar? Absolutely not. And the negative of sugar is more the fact that it is void of any types of like micronutrients. It's typically easy to overeat because it's not very filling. Yes, you may crave a little bit more, but when calories are equated and you account for it, there doesn't appear to be a difference. And really, I mean, as a coach, I don't even track sugar, and I don't have anybody else track sugar either. I'm looking at other things more important like your calories and proteins, but I do usually track fiber. And in my mind, it's not the higher sugar that's the problem in a high sugar diet. It's usually the lower fiber in a high sugar diet that is more of the problem. Regardless, when it comes to why obesity is such a big problem, it's not sugar, it's not fat, it's not any certain types of foods or macronutrients. It's just that we're eating more, we're moving less. Life has gotten much more convenient. A lot of people don't even ever have to leave their house anymore. You get your packages delivered, you get your food delivered, you work from home, you're not getting any exercise in. There's a lot of high calorie, convenient foods you can get, you can order in, and this stuff just adds up quickly, and it's made it much more difficult to maintain a healthy weight. Granted, it's not impossible. It just goes to show the importance of monitoring your nutrition, getting regular exercise in. But the main point to all of this is that this is great news. Like, even if you don't necessarily believe it or didn't come in, if this is now the truth, which it certainly seems to be, now we always need to be open-minded. We can get more research that comes in, we can find out more. But right now, all signs are pointing to it's not sugar. And that's a great thing if you struggle with staying on plan because you feel like you need to avoid all sugary foods and then you end up overdoing it and binging on it because you feel so restricted. Well, now that you know you can eat this stuff in moderation and you'll be fine, that gives you much more options. But I don't care if you eat a lot of sugar or not. I don't care if you completely eat no sugar. Whatever works best for you is fine. The point is, whatever diet you find to be the least restrictive for you is the diet that's going to be the most effective for you, and that could be different for everyone. The reason I like a more flexible dieting approach is because it gives me the choice to choose what I want and what I don't want, and I get to do that on my own terms, and I'm not told I can't have this. There's something psychological about that. When something's off limits, you tend to want it more. But whatever diet that might be, whether it's paleo or keto or intermittent fasting or anything else, none of these things are magic. They're just different ways to keep calories down. And if you find one style of dieting less restrictive, you're more likely to stick with it. And the biggest reason in my mind why very few people can keep weight off is because they do unsustainable dieting methods. And saying that you're never going to eat sugar again when you really like sugar, probably not going to be very sustainable. Now, if you found this video eye-opening and kind of surprising, well, there's actually quite a few different weight loss myths that are out there, and I cover several of them in this top video. So you're going to want to check that one out next and see what else you may be shocked by. Otherwise, I think you'll like this bottom video instead, and I'll see you in one of those other videos.